kids from the high impact, high velocity rounds from this weapon of war, those rounds that expend their entire kinetic energy inside of your body, to shred your insides to shit, to destroy the soft tissue inside of you, to ensure that you bleed to death, because that's what we want enemy soldiers to do on a battlefield so they cannot get back up and kill one of our own. Kids who were hunted down in the aisles of an old boy who was supposed to start school that next Monday, killed right there. A 90-year-old man who was there with his 87-year-old wife, who's been married to her for 70 years, killed where he shopped. All of them because of their ethnicity, the color of their skin, their presumed country of national origin. That very thing that makes America great in the first place, makes El Paso so special, was what drew that gunman to us. There's something that we all learned on August 3rd. No matter how special your community, you're still connected to the rest of this country. Martin Luther King talked about this inescapable network of mutuality. We may be safe, we may be special, we may only lose the lives of 18 people in a given year in El Paso, Texas, but we are still connected to a very violent country, a country whose very foundation is racist, that began not on July 4th, 1776, but on August 20th of 1619, when the first kidnapped slave was brought here against his will and sold to begin building the greatness and the wealth and the riches that would not only distinguish this country, but from which his descendants would be functionally prevented from enjoying or participating in. That violence in this country, alive and well, brought out into the open, given permission to act by a president who during his administration has seen hate crimes on the rise every single one of the last 3 years, who does not just offend us with the crazy shit that he says, but fundamentally changes us by what he brings out into the open. The day that he signed the Muslim ban, or his executive action attempting to reduce or stop Muslim travel to the United States, the mosque in Victoria, Texas, in my home state, was burned to the ground. After repeated warnings of caravans, and when asked about who's funding them, and is it George Soros, a wealthy Jewish American, and the president says, I don't know, maybe it is. Gunman walks in to the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and begins killing Jewish Americans, ranting about a caravan that he wants to stop. The president asking 4 women of color, duly elected by their constituents, to go back to their country. Tell me what the fuck that means. When they're Americans, 3 of them born in this very country.
And one represents here in Boston, Hayana.
That's right. Yeah. Representative Presley.
Yes.
And imagine what this is doing, and maybe some of you know, to our kids. 2017, walked into LBJ Elementary in El Paso, Texas. 3rd grader says, why does the president not like me? She's saying that because she's Mexican American. I tell that story in Houston, and a family comes up afterwards and they say, man, that story hits home with us because our 3rd grade daughter came home from school today and asked us if we should go back to our home country, though she was born in the United States of America, though we were born in the United States of America as well. What does that do to her conception of herself and her sense of self-worth and her ability to contribute to the greatness of this country, or whether she should be in this great country in the first place? These are the very real consequences of this president and everything that pre-existed his administration that all of us feared to face and deal with and take on and change and make better. And now we reap the consequences of this. I saw it in El Paso, Texas. I saw it just this last weekend in Midland and Odessa. 7 people killed by a gunman with an AR-15. Talking to a mother who lost her daughter, in fact, watched her 15-year-old daughter bleed to death in front of her very eyes as she waited for more than an hour for the ambulance to arrive because so many other people were shot and killed over the course of that gunman's rampage throughout Midland and Odessa.
This is fucked up.
This is fucked up. That is the term of art. That's what we have to call it out for. We have to change this, or it is on all of us. We are complicit in it. In a government of, by, and for the people. We can take no satisfaction in this being Donald Trump or the Republican Party. It is really all of us for as long as it persists. Going to Mississippi, the site of the single largest single state raid by ICE agents, picked up nearly 700 people working jobs in a chicken processing plant, some of whom have been here for 15, 20, 25 years, raising their U.S. citizen children, working a job that no one born in Canton, Mississippi, or Forest, Mississippi, is willing or wanting or maybe able to work right now. Their immigration status used as leverage against them to keep their wages low, to ensure they have no recourse if they're abused in the workplace. But yet they strive and struggle to get ahead for themselves, for their kids, committing no violent crimes, posing no threat. You and I, the U.S. taxpayer, flew in 600 agents, helicopters, body armor, guns drawn, people tased in their workplaces, cuffed by their wrists, some cuffed by their ankles, some wrists and ankles cuffed together, tied up like hogs, taken to a detention center, separated from their families. I met one man whose wife was being detained. In his arms was his 4-month-old daughter, inconsolable. Mother, we heard, also depressed and distraught. Her breasts swollen and painful because she's no longer able to feed her child. What are we doing to her? And for what reason? Workplace immigration rates up tenfold under this administration. It is all part of a larger program to terrify people based on their differences from the majority, to take your very well-founded frustration at the dysfunction of our government that we cannot pay you a living wage. We cannot ensure that health care is a right and not a privilege or a function of luck, that we can't rewrite our immigration laws in our own image, to make sure that we are a just country that lives in the best traditions of a country of immigrants and asylum seekers and refugees, that we fail to confront climate change before it is too late. I mention all of this because when we fail to make progress, we leave fertile ground for demagogues like Donald Trump, who direct our anger, our frustration, and our fear and our disappointment at the most vulnerable, at the defenseless, who rip further apart a country that is already so highly divided and polarized. So what's the answer to this? On every single one of these issues, you already know the answer. On guns, not just universal background checks, not just red flag laws to stop someone who owns a firearm before they kill themselves or kill someone in their lives or in your life. Not just ending the sale of weapons of war, these AK-47s and AR-15s, but going well beyond that. Buying back every existing AR-15 and AK-47 that's on the streets. Mandatory licensing and gun registration. Raising the purchase age to buy a firearm from 18 years old to 21 years old. And going not just to Boston, Massachusetts, or El Paso, Texas to convey this message, but showing up as we did in Conway, Arkansas at a gun show to listen to those who are selling AR-15s and AK-47s and who are buying them to see if there might not be some common ground. And guess what? I was surprised to find that there is, because those gun owners have kids who are scared to go to school the next day, kids who are afraid of the future, instead of strong and confident and courageous about the next day or the next school year. It's why we got to make sure that when it comes to healthcare, you do not continue to have a problem. Profound in Texas, where the largest provider of mental health care services is the county jail system, where people with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder far too often get arrested on purpose to be taken to the one place they are guaranteed care that they otherwise wouldn't receive. And that we ensure that we have universal, guaranteed, high-quality health care, primary health care without a copay, medication without a copay, mental health care without a copay, and every woman able to make her own decisions about her own body and have access to the health care that she needs without a copay. It means not only not locking up kids and separating from their parents, not only not deporting those parents who risked their lives to bring the child here in the first place, not only reuniting all of those families who have been separated, but ensuring that we rewrite our immigration laws in our own image, the image of the people here in El Paso, across this country. If immigration is a problem, it is the best possible problem the United States could have. And what if we started by saying that every dreamer, more than 1 million strong, every bit as American as anyone else in this room right now, should never have to fear deportation back to a country they do not know, whose language they do not speak, where they no longer have family, where if they are successful against those long odds, they'll be successful for that place and not this one. We make them U.S. citizens in this, their true home country. Their parents, their siblings, 9 million more, all across the United States, in Mississippi and Massachusetts and Texas and Arkansas. Bring them out of the shadows. Allow them to contribute even more to the greatness of America as legal permanent residents on a pathway to citizenship, and then going to Guatemala and El Salvador and Honduras, some of the deadliest places on planet Earth today, and working with the populations there to reduce violence so that they can stay at home, to address climate change and an historic drought in Guatemala caused not by God nor by Mother Nature, but by all of us, our excesses, our emissions, our inaction in the face of the facts and the truth and the science. We have some culpability and some responsibility and an opportunity to show real, true global leadership. And so let's take it. And then let's make sure that going forward in this robust, growing economy, that it is robust and growing for every single one of us, that we don't have our fellow Americans strangers in their own country on the outside looking in to the wealth and the richness that they helped to create in the first place. Paid in Texas $7.25 an hour. Try paying the rent, putting food on the table, taking care of yourself and your kids on $7.25 an hour. You cannot. And so you will work a second job or a third job. And you know what? You're probably the parents of the child who's 10 months behind in reading comprehension on the first day of kindergarten because you did not have the luxury to read to her before the first day of kindergarten. So what if we decided we would have a minimum wage that is a living wage, $15 as the floor, no matter where you live in the United States. The ability to take time off, paid to take care of yourself, your kids, your family. Elevate the role and the position of unions, the apprenticeships that they can create, the skills and the trades that we will be able to learn that will help us to command dignity and a living wage for the rest of our lives. These are the right things to do by and for one another. And I guarantee you, when we do them, we no longer have Donald Trumps elected into positions of power and public trust who use that platform to terrorize our fellow Americans. And frankly, given what he's doing right now and the damage we've already seen, the rest of the world. And I'll close with this. Speaking of the world, and all of us and every generation that will follow the one that is here today, enjoying a beer tonight. The scientists have been clear about this for decades. In fact, everything that we know about climate change today in 2019, we more or less, más o menos, knew in 1979, 40 years ago. That the flooding that we saw in Houston, Texas in 2017, 58 inches of rain dropped from the sky. That is the landfall record for as long as we've been keeping them in North America. And it was the third 500-year flood in that city in just 5 years. The flooding along the Missouri and the Mississippi on either side of the state in Iowa, also both at historic levels. The droughts in California followed by the fires in California at record levels. The fact that every time it rains in Charleston, and it is dumping in Charleston right now, it floods in Charleston. This is on all of us. And no country has contributed more to a changing climate, to a cooking planet, than the United States of America. No country has a better opportunity to get this right for all of us and everyone who will succeed all of us and those who are alive and in this room right now, because those same scientists say that we have but 10 years left to us to get this right. No margin of error, no opportunity for excuse. It has to be fully freeing ourselves from any dependence on fossil fuels. It has to be ensuring that rural communities and farmers and ranchers and producers and growers are able to do their part, that we pay them for environmental services that they want to provide, that we invest in the next generation of wind and solar and battery technology so that we can own the future not just of this country, but of planet Earth as we help the other countries to meet their obligations to avert the worst catastrophes of climate change before it is too late. We have warmed 1 degree Celsius already since the Industrial Revolution. We are told if we warm 1.5 cumulatively, we are screwed, is the scientific term. So we have little time and little room and a lot of amazing people across this country who want to do the right thing. And this challenge cannot be met by half measure or by half steps or by only half the country. Cannot just be Democrats, cannot just be in big cities or along the coasts. It has to be all of us doing all that we can at this defining, deciding moment of truth. That is what I hope has brought you out here tonight. Unless you were just innocently drinking a beer when I walked in, which is perfectly fine thing to do. Not for a candidate, not for a political party, but for this country and our shared future. That's what brought me out here tonight as well, and I'm grateful to be with you. Thank you all for joining us. Looking forward to hearing what's on your mind. Cynthia, are we going to be able to take some questions? Okay. You want this mic? So Cynthia, who's right here, has got a microphone. She will bring it to you. We want to bring as many people into the conversation as possible. Cheers to everyone who's having a drink. Please drink responsibly.
All right.
Take the bus.
Here's our first question, Pablo.
Yep.
Okay, hello. So I'm from Georgia, and I was wondering about like voter suppression and like what are some of the ways that you can like limit that? Because in our last midterm elections, Brian Kemp did some very shady shit, basically, and a lot of minorities, me included, was sent an absentee ballot. My vote was not counted at the last midterm election. So what can you do about that?
Yeah. Pablo, thank you for the question. Because of what you just described, we have functionally disenfranchised hundreds of thousands of our fellow Americans. But for what you just described, Stacey Abrams would be the governor of the state of Georgia right now. So we see this in every part of the United States. Texas, until this last midterm election, ranked 50th in voter turnout. Not because we love our democracy less than you do here in Massachusetts, but because we were drawn that way, not by accident, but by design. Based on your race and your ethnicity, African American, Mexican American, to be specific, you were drawn out of a congressional district to diminish the power of your vote or the likelihood that your voice would ever be heard. To stunning effect. You can use your license to carry a firearm in Texas to prove who you are at the ballot box to vote. You cannot use your student ID at the University of Texas at El Paso at the ballot box to prove who you are to be able to vote. So the answer to this has to be a new Voting Rights Act that takes away every single barrier, that no longer allows us to gerrymander based on race or ethnicity or party persuasion or anything. People like me and Representative Gregoire should not be allowed into those redistricting rooms. It should be the very people who will disproportionately bear the consequences of those redistricting decisions, who are there to draw them along logical lines. We should have automatic and same-day voter registration so there can be no doubt that you have that right to vote and you're able to exercise it. Y además, we should have either paper ballots in every election or paper receipts for every vote cast so that we can audit the elections in this country and that you know your vote is going to go to its intended recipient. So these, Pablo, are some changes that we could make to make sure that it's one person, one vote in the United States of America. Thank you. Thanks for the question.
Okay, behind you by the exit sign. Here we go.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Becca.
Hi.
We hear a lot from candidates about climate change and things like housing, but I think that those topics tend to focus on suburban and rural areas. So we hear about things, or we see that the federal government subsidizes highways, but doesn't really care so much about public transit and cares a lot about supporting people buying houses in the suburbs, but not helping people pay for rent in the cities. So I'm wondering, is it too toxic for a candidate to come out and seem to support cities in a strong way?
Yeah. No, it's not too toxic. Here's a tough thing to talk about, though we must. Rich people are going to have to allow or be forced to allow lower income people to live near them, which is what we fail to do in this country right now. We force lower income working Americans to drive 1, 2, 3 hours in either direction to get to their jobs, very often minimum wage jobs, so they're working 2 or 3 of them right now. What if, as we propose to do, we invested in housing that was closer to where you work, very often mixed income housing, meaning the very wealthiest are living next to those who are not the very wealthiest in this country, to make sure that they can both afford to go to the same public schools, that we really have that as a place where in this divided country right now, you can come together without regard to your income or your race or your ethnicity or any other difference that should not matter right now. What if we invested, as we propose to do, in high-speed rail and in transit in all of our cities to make sure that if you do not have a car or do not want to use a car, you will not need to have one, or you will not be penalized for not having one right now. So having cities that are smarter, that are denser, that have people living closer to where they work and where their families are, to reduce our impact on climate change and greenhouse gas emissions, but also just to improve the quality of life in these built environments. That's an extraordinary opportunity. In our plan to confront climate change, we make those investments. Thank you for asking. Appreciate it.
Okay, to your right. Right here.
Okay, thanks. Hi.
Hi, my name's Athena.
Oh, thank you.
At the beginning of July, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced a commission on unalienable rights. And he appointed an notoriously anti-LGBTQ, anti-abortion activist who works at Harvard to head this commission. And I haven't heard any presidential candidates talk about this subject. So what would you do to push back against this redefinition of human rights and recommit to human rights declarations like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the international covenants that we signed in the 1970s?
Thank you for asking such a thoughtful question. Our response to this should be to do exactly as you say, to make clear and unambiguous that we stand up for everyone, especially those who are persecuted based on their sexual orientation or their ethnicity or their religion or any one of these differences that some governments will use to define and to divide and to persecute and to terrorize. But you know what? We also have to start at home. When we have a president who by tweet has dismissed the service of transgender Americans, and we don't know how many have saved the lives of their fellow Americans or lost their lives in service to this country. Where in Texas you can be fired based on your sexual orientation, or though there are 30,000 kids in the foster care system, and it is so poorly funded and run that those kids up until recently were sleeping under the desks or on top of the desks in CPS offices, you can by law be too gay to adopt one of those kids in our state. We have to start by passing the Equality Act in the United States so that the full civil rights of every single one of our fellow Americans is respected and honored. We have to reverse the transgender troop ban. We have to make sure that we live our values at home and acknowledge that whether it is religion in a country where the president promised to ban all people of one religion, whether it is race in a country where there's 10 times the wealth in white America than there is in black America, where we have a prison population of 2.3 million, the largest on planet Earth, disproportionately comprised of people of color, where in a kindergarten classroom, when you are 4 or 5 years old, you're 5 times as likely to be disciplined or suspended or expelled if you are a child of color. Or in many of our states, and North Carolina and Texas are 2 examples that come to mind, we seek to scare parents about transgender kids with these bathroom bills, though we know that transgender children are far more often the victims than they are the perpetrators of these attacks. We've got to get this right in our country so that we have the moral standing to lead internationally. And that's what I want to do as president. Thank you for asking. Appreciate it.
Okay, behind you by the wall.
Oh, there you are. Thank you so much.
Hi, Congressman. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
And so my community and everyone I talk to is going to vote blue. There's no convincing there. It's everyone that doesn't live in Massachusetts or in my community in the coast or whatever that we have to convince and win over in this election. And I've donated to Amy McGrath. I've donated to some close Senate races, and whoever runs against John Cornyn, I will donate to them. But is there any way that I don't work in a campaign, I work elsewhere, not in politics? Is there any side thing, anything that me with my skills I can help to convince these people in the Midwest, these swing states, to go for us?
Yes. Yes. And Representative Gregoire, who I should have introduced at the outset today, you know this as well as anyone in this room, that showing up for everyone, knocking on every door, not writing anybody off. We say, no me importa, I don't care who you voted for in the last election, how rural or urban your community is, who you love, who you pray to, or whether you pray at all. You're our fellow Americans, and we're going to show up, and we're going to listen to you, and we're going to bring you into the conversation. In Texas, and many of you helped us remotely from Boston by phone banking into Texas. Some of you brave souls even came down to Texas for a week or a couple of weeks to knock on doors. I went to every one of those 254 counties. Not the reddest places in Texas, but the reddest places on planet Earth. Places that voted for Donald Trump 96% in the last election. But I hope you agree, they're every bit as deserving of our attention, our respect, of being served, of being fought for, and we can't hope to help them if we have not shown up for them first and listened to them. And who knows, that might have had something to do with the fact that at the end of the day, though we did not defeat Ted Cruz, we won more votes than any Democrat had in the history of the state of Texas. And that now makes possible what you're asking, because we won independence for the first time in decades. We won nearly 500,000 Republican votes, flipped 2 congressional seats, Republicans replaced by Democrats. And in Houston, 17 African American women elected to judicial positions, changing the face of criminal justice. That's the way we do it. And so, Here are some ideas. We were just in Bland County, Virginia, which is in the southwestern part of the state. When we showed up in this very Republican, very rural part of America, they told us that in our 243-year history, no candidate for the presidency had ever come to Bland County to listen to those that we wanted to serve and represent. And so let's show up for them. And who knows, maybe we won a vote or 2 in Bland County. But if you're willing to make those kinds of trips here to other parts of Massachusetts or to other parts of the Northeast or just other parts of America, if you're willing to sign up for a phone bank with our campaign or someone else's, I guarantee you that your participation, your human-to-human connection in this digital age will make the difference. So please, keep it up and know that we're counting on you. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Okay, here we go.
Hi, my name is Maida. Because the U.S. is so powerful and has such a big influence on the rest of the world, I have a foreign policy question. What is your position on Iran and the Iran nuclear deal and the fact that Trump pulled out of it and reinstated the sanctions? Because I was there this summer and it's had a really big impact on Iran and its people.
Maida, thank you for being here and for asking the question. The short answer is I would rejoin the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. It is the agreement that the United States helped to negotiate and to lead. And check this out, this is kind of a mind blower in U.S. history. we were able to, with Iran at the table, but also Russia and China and the other permanent members of the UN Security Council, plus Germany, get all parties to agree to a deal that would stop Iran's ability to develop a nuclear weapon without firing a shot or invading yet another country at a time that we're at war in our 18th year in Afghanistan, our 28th year in Iraq. We're at war tonight, though, in Syria and Yemen and Somalia and Libya as well. This was a masterstroke of diplomacy. And inexplicably, though it made us safer, though it began the path to address some of the other challenges that we have with Iran, our president pulled us out, diminished instead of improving our safety and security, and now Iran has functionally pulled out as well, and they're going to begin their march towards development of a nuclear weapon. We must, and I will, reconvene those members of the UN Security Council and Iran, though we have deeply damaged the good faith that they depend on, to that table to make sure that without going to war, without having to impose crippling sanctions that affect people's ability to feed themselves or medicate themselves or take care of themselves, which reduce the dignity of other countries and the people within them, that we get to a peace